going on YouTube? My name is Ekuegan, you call me EK. In today's video I want to go over what I've been running on my rogue. I kind of like this build that I set up. If you're out there, you're probably like wondering why was I running flurry. I kind of like flurry because in terms of survivability, I felt like it was good for me. Twisted Blaze is a very strong setup that most people have. Let's go through this as quick as possible. But before we do that, don't forget Elgato is one of my biggest supporters. I would say if I look in my room, I have boxes of Elgato stuff everywhere. I have 2 stream decks in front of me. I have a few extra items. But today I want to talk about my favorite item from Elgato, the foot pedal. The foot pedal allows me to get into multiple things. Perfect example for Discord, if I need to mute, unmute, or even deafen, all I have to do is just tapping my foot, I can do that. Another cool thing is you can set it up for it to be an extra button. If you're playing Diablo and you're like, man, I'm tired of like pressing 4, you can actually turn that button into one of the buttons on your foot pedal. You know, so it is a very nice thing to have. If you're out there, make sure you check it out. The link will be in the description below. If you have never checked it out, if you do pick it up, let me know. Now let's get back to this build. This build is about bringing a huge crowd of enemies together, freezing them, and then just making everything explode. I am going to do my best to try to go through each aspect that I have running here. One of the aspects is currently disabled, which is Edge Master. I feel like once that comes back, it's going to be much better. I will also have a link for my build in the description from D4 builds, so you'll be able to just, you know, kind of go through it, look at my Paragon and so on. So I'm not going to go through Paragon right away, or I'm not going to basically break down every piece of the Paragon, but once again, it is there. You can just copy and paste it as you go, and you can change up stuff if you feel like it. So let's start out with my abilities. I have Puncture. Puncture is basically the basic attack, which is going to allow me to proc vulnerability on a lot of enemies. I am using Flurry. I'm making sure that I have Enhanced Flurry, which is going to heal me every time I hit a crowd control or vulnerable enemy. It heals me from 1% and up to 12%. So basically per cast, I get to basically heal myself. This is really good, especially if you want to be tanking stuff. And then I put on Improved Flurry. The next, normally I would have some kind of agility perk, but I do not because we are tied to 5 slots. So I didn't go for that. The Poison Trap is the next thing that I have here with Enhanced Poison Trap and Counter Poison Trap, okay? So Poison Trap has a 30% chance to reset your imbuement skill cooldown when activated. This is a good thing because I am going to be running not only the cold imbuement, but I'm also going to be running the shadow imbuement, all right? So pairing those two together and having this is actually very nice. Now, one neat thing that I want to talk about here is this. The main focus is to pull ass together, freeze, and then turn on your shadow imbuement and break it apart. There's going to be an aspect that I'm going to show for that as well. I do have on Exploit, which I deal increased damage to healthy and injured enemies, with Malice as well, which I deal increased damage to vulnerable enemies, and if you're running Flurry, everything is vulnerable. Now, Shadow Crash is at 1, Consuming Shadows is going to be at 3. Every time I kill an enemy with shadow damage, I get 30 energy. Now, Precision Imbuement is a very nice thing. Imbue skills gain 9% critical strike chance. It is very nice to have. Make sure that you have Frigid Finesse and Chilling Weight on, because it's pretty awesome. For Cold Imbuement, I did go down to Mixed Cold Imbuement. Cold Imbue skills deal 20% damage to crowd-controlled enemies. And remember, we are going to be having crowd control up most of the time. Now, one neat thing here, too, is this. Mixed Shadow Imbuement. Enemies affected by Shadow Imbuement take 12% increased non-physical damage from you. If you need to know what's not physical and what is, you can go here and you can just click on non-physical. It shows you what's non-physical. And if you click on physical, it shows you what attacks are also physical. All right. You can see that Flurry is a physical one. The reason why I didn't use Blended Shadow Imbuement is because Primary Explosion make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. I'm already making enemies vulnerable with Flurry, so it's not needed, okay? Next, Trap Mastery. I'm going to be running 2 traps, which are going to be the Death Trap and the Poison Trap. So when Poison or Death Trap activate, I get a 12% increased critical strike chance against vulnerable, okay? So this whole thing is vulnerable enemies, crowd control, are 2 of the main things that I have here. So if I click on crowd control and vulnerable, you're going to see that the things that I've chosen are going to be highlighted for that, okay? Which is, you know, which is a pretty fun thing. So when things are frozen, I get that crowd control up as well. For Death Trap, make sure you have on the Prime Death Trap at least. Enemies are pulled into Death Trap when it activates. And then if Death Trap kills an enemy, its cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds. This is very nice because we can pair this up with Exposure, okay? So the lucky hit, dealing direct damage to an enemy affected by a trap, has up to a 25% chance to reduce the active cooldown of your trap skills. Okay, so that is going to work really well with the Supreme Death Trap. Another thing here is it drops a cluster of exploding stun grenades that deal about 40% total physical damage and stun enemies. This is nice to have. Now this, I got it from like a piece of armor. You don't need this here, but the main things will be in the build link that I put in chat. Okay, so you will have that at your in the links. Another neat thing that I forgot to go over is weapon mastery. Okay, I am running daggers. So daggers, if you rank up weapon mastery, you're going to be doing 15% increased damage to healthy enemies, which is really nice. I'm not running swords, so that's kind of another thing here. Now for Paragon, there's a lot going on for my Paragon. So if you really need a complete breakdown, you can always find me at twitch.tv/Ekuegan, and I could do my best to kind of answer those questions. But most of this is going to be built into dexterity. Okay, and my second card is built into traps. Don't forget, I'm running traps, right? So one of the neat things for me here is to have damage reduction from enemies that are affected by trap skills. So I kind of have that. Then I have 20% damage to enemies affected by trap skills. I guess the whole goal is to have a good uptime on my death trap and poison trap. And every time I have that up, it's going to work with what I'm running here. Now, the last piece of the puzzle for spec is going to be preparation. So every 100 energy that I spend reduces my ultimate skill cooldown for 4 seconds. But if I use my ultimate, it resets the cooldown of my other skills. So basically, if I pop this bad boy, I get my imbuements back with my poison trap. Okay? Another neat thing that you'll notice too in my Paragon is that I set it up to where you also do more damage to enemies that are poisoned. Okay, so having this trap up is really nice because you can drop it down. Another cool thing about poison trap is it knocks down enemies for about 2 seconds when it activates. Okay, so if enemies run up, you drop that trap, it's gonna knock them down. This is almost like a stun the whole time to keep enemies off of you. The weird thing is, I notice I don't do too much damage if there's one target, but if there's an entire group and I pull them together, my uptime is ridiculous. And the neat thing is you can spam this to basically clear out an entire room. And if you're fighting a boss, that boss is going to be taking damage from your death trap, and then if you put down your poison trap, you're going to notice that it's also going to help out because of exposure. Now, my aspects as they go are here. So perfect example, if you don't know what the aspects are, basically they're the golden part on my armor. And if you put an aspect on a piece of armor, it changes the name. Okay, so for example, my chest piece says Runic Mail of the Protector because I'm running the Protector aspect, right? My helmet says Cheats Doom Cask is because I'm running the Cheat aspect. My gloves, I'm running a Conceited aspect, which allows me to deal damage while I have a berry active. Now, one neat thing I want to point out is I'm running the Temerity pants. What do these pants do? So while you're injured, your potion also grants 45 movement speed for 2 seconds. But the neat thing is anything that heals you beyond 100% grants you a barrier, right? So if I have a full life, right, and I pop my potion right here, you'll notice that I have a shield, okay? So now I'm pairing that together with Conceited, which allows me to deal increased damage while I have a barrier active. So that's a neat thing to have. You could put Conceited on the amulet if you wanted to, but I like my imbuement skill having an increased potency against vulnerable enemies because I'm going to be making enemies vulnerable. So I like to have this up instead at 60. Now for my pants, I'm running Penitent Greaves. Do you need it? Not really, but it is nice to have. Why? Because not only do you get crowd control duration, you get slow duration reduction as well. And the neat thing is you have cold resistance, and as you're running around, you're leaving a trail of frost that deals about 7, well for me right now, 7% to chilled enemies. Okay, so while you're running around, you can actually run around the target and freeze it if you wanted to. And for my weapon, I'm running Flurry. This thing is called Encircling Blades. It is the aspect for Flurry. Flurry damages enemy in a circle around you and deal 28% increased damage. The max that you can get is 30%. I haven't gotten that piece yet, but at 28 is kind of close for me. This is very much needed. because once you get this going and you're making you pop your imbuement, you're gonna freeze a bunch of things, and you're gonna just see a bunch of things just fly off through explosion. Now for my amulet, we spoke about it. This is basically the corruption aspect, which my imbuement skills have an increased potency against vulnerable enemies. The next thing is going to be the unstable imbuements. This is one of the major things that kind of works out here, is because when I cast an imbuement skill, it triggers an imbuement explosion around me, applying the imbuement effect and dealing damage of the same type. So whenever I pop my imbuement, if anything's around me, it's probably going to get, either, chilled or frozen right away. Same thing for the shadow imbuement. It's a very nice thing to kind of have, because we're going to be pairing that together with the Icy Alchemist aspect. Damaging a chill or frozen enemy with a shadow imbue skill has up to 75% chance to release an explosion that deals cold damage to the target and surrounding enemies, chilling them for 15%. So that means that I can kind of spread this out as well, okay? But remember, as you're spreading this out, Death Trap is going to be pulling things in, which allows you to kind of keep this flow going. Now for my daggers, I have on the aspect of the expectant Serpent's Bite of the expectant. Attacking enemies with a basic skill increases the damage of your next core skill cast by 10%. I like using this. The reason why I like using this is because I'm more likely going to use my puncture to start out with, and once I have everything vulnerable, I'm going to use my flurry, which is going to be imbued. Now, Edge Master is currently disabled, but when it comes back, it's going to be another add-on to this build. Skills deal up to 20% increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving a maximum benefit when you have full primary resource. Okay, now you have to think about that with the preparation spec as well. That's not a bad thing to have. Okay, now you could use. There's a few different things that you can go for here. There's an aspect that you deal damage while you're standing still. You could probably go for that on the weapon instead of Edge Master until Edge Master gets fixed, but that's a whole nother story. So let's go in here and let's gather a crowd and see how it goes. So the whole focus is to grab a big group of ads, right? Drop the Death Trap, pull them in, use my imbuement, freeze everything, and then just shatter. As you can see, that whole entire group just got demolished. Oh, there's a loot goblin, and he's booking it. Alright, so if you're out there, you've been watching my stream, you've been wondering what I've been running, that is the whole entire setup. If you have any questions, you can always find me at twitch.tv/Ekuegan. We do have a community Discord. We have different rooms where we're going to be putting a bunch of different builds. And if you're looking for people to play with, people to level up with, we create an LFG, and we also have rooms for farming. So if you want to check that out, it's going to be discord.gg/Ekuegan. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. I see you out there. Deuces.